Reddit. Regardless of your opinion of the occult or supernatural, what is the most downright creepy or inexplicable thing that you've ever experienced? Part 1? Please like and subscribe to support this channel. Almost a full year ago, at about 1 a.m., I heard my upstairs neighbor come home. I was busy playing a game and chatting to friends on Instagram. A little while later, there was a frenetic thumping, as if someone was running across the floor at breakneck speed. Then silence, followed by the most unearthly high-pitched scream I've ever heard in my life, interspersed with low guttural moaning, like a death rattle. I legit thought the guy was in trouble, maybe ill. At one point I thought he might be having a fight with his soul, though I knew he lived alone. As unholy as it all sounded, I'm an atheist, so I didn't really think there was anything spooky going on. I still don't, even though it was terrifying enough at the time to make my blood run cold. Every time the ridiculously unnatural thumping across the floor began, my heart would start pounding uncontrollably, and I'd break out in a cold sweat. Everything about it just felt wrong. The upstairs apartment was identical to mine, and the sound moving across the floor spanned 2 rooms and a long passage, and it just moved too damn fast to be someone running. Every single time it started up, despite everything my logical brain told me, I became glued to the spot, transfixed with a sense of cold, creeping dread. After all, the only thing separating me from whatever was making that sound was my ceiling. Eventually, I decided I had to be a responsible neighbor. I had to go and check on him, just in case it was a medical issue. Or he was drunk and killing his partner. So I opened my front door, made my way up the steps, past one of his windows, and I was just about to knock on the door, when the screaming began again. I was chatting to a friend on Instagram earlier, and my phone was still in my hand, in case of emergency, so I hit record. I recorded a few minutes, and then got the hell out of there. Back home, I locked my gate and door, and called the cops. They turned up about 20 minutes later. I heard them talking to the guy, then they all came out of his apartment, he got into his car and drove away, and the cops left. I'm still trying to figure out what was going on, to this day. If he was drunk or drugged, they would not have let him drive anywhere. There was nobody else in the apartment, just him. The lights were all off after, and no sound from upstairs showing anyone at home. Here's part of the story I saved to Instagram a little while after. My aunt has a house about 4 hours north of where I grew up. It's a suburb of a major city. Basic neighborhood. 2-story homes. Middle class. Basic. My dad and I used to go up there every year for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I was asleep in the basement bedroom one night and woke up to see a black silhouette leaning over me. It didn't have eyes or any features or anything, but I specifically remember seeing it and starting to panic before it sort of just faded away. A different time we were staying there, I was sleeping in the bedroom at the very far end of the main hallway on the first floor. I woke up one night and had to pee. So I left the bedroom and turned to go down the hall. I looked up, and as I did, I saw a black featureless silhouette drift across the opposite end of the hall from the dining room to the living room. I brought it up to my aunt later on, and she said she had seen the same thing before. She said she'd woken up and seen it in the corner of her room before, and that she'd seen it in the hallway too. My dad had also seen it. They never brought it up to me because they didn't want to scare me. I'm sure there has to be some logical explanation for it, but it still creeps me out to this day. When I was young, 10 to 12, I would wake up earlier than everyone else and it would be dark out still. I would head to the basement to watch TV or go on the computer. I wouldn't turn lights on, I would just walk through the house in total darkness. To get downstairs you would go down 2 steps to the landing and back door and then turn left and go down the flight of stairs. This was back when we had an old tube TV, and if you know about them then you probably remember when you turned off a tube TV there would be a white flash of light for a split second. It happened many times where I would see a light flash reflect off the wall at the bottom of the stairs when I would start walking down. The type of flash that looked like someone turned the TV off. It was the creepiest thing when I would see it. I also had some feelings of someone else there if I woke up in the middle of the night sometimes. It's possible my eyes or brain were playing tricks on me, but it happened more than once. I always left the lights off and tried to be quiet to catch this couch potato phantom. I grew up in Mississippi and we used to go play in the woods off the Natchez Trace when we were teens. The NT was a vital trade route in the 1800s and a lot of bad things occurred there. There was a group of us and we kept seeing the figure of a man watching us from behind various trees. Okay, so it was a guy watching us, right? But this guy kept randomly appearing behind trees approximately 50 feet apart, and there was no way he could make the distance between them without being seen. A few of us decided to flank him and came up alongside. There was nobody there. We promptly got the fuck out of there. I had several experiences like that over the first 20 years of my life in that state. Driving down a street, middle of the day, I checked my rearview for traffic behind me and saw a hand reach up in the back seat. Almost jumped the curb when I swerved out of shock, looked around to an empty seat. I pulled into a parking lot to confirm that I couldn't have seen anything. Not only was the back seat empty of people but no loose items either. No events in my life around this, no deaths of family or friends, and nothing that I could find out about the spot on the city street that was significant. I witnessed a 12-year-old boy likely experiencing dissociative identity disorder transition between personalities. Every muscle in his face changed. His voice changed. His eyes changed in dilation and patterns of movement. The voice was unearthly and sinister. He began threatening to hurt his primary personality and everyone in the room. It was genuinely terrifying. I share this because at the time I was much younger and believed it was a supernatural, possession-type occurrence. Back in the 80s, my Aunt Kay was in her early 20s. This was before she married my uncle, and when she would drive long distances back and forth between her parents and my uncle's to visit. It was a transitional period for them. He had just graduated and she hadn't moved out yet to be with him. It was a long drive across several states, through the desert, which took her hours. This desolate highway would have stretches of road that lasted hundreds of miles where you quite often wouldn't see another driver, let alone a gas station. So Aunt Kay set out and began one of these journeys. A couple hours into the drive, Aunt Kay noticed a dark vehicle slowly catching up to her. She barely noticed as she continued to sing along to Les Miserables until the vehicle got aggressively close. She turned off the music and looked into her rearview mirror, seeing the vehicle flash its brights and a hand pointing at her car and motioning to pull over. Alarmed, she quickly slowed and began to look for a good place to pull off the road to see what must be wrong with her car. The second she began to pull off the road, she said she felt and heard as clear as day, "Don't pull over." Then again, stronger, "Don't pull over." Call it God, intuition, or just a gut feeling, but a jolt of adrenaline and fear shot through Aunt Kay's body as she hit the gas and peeled back out onto the highway. Heart pumping, Aunt Kay silently asked herself what the hell was that, as she saw the vehicle peel out behind her. The dark vehicle continued to closely follow, flash their brights and motion to her to pull over. Fear and confusion set in as Aunt Kay began to question what was going on. Why was the driver motioning for her to pull over? Was there something wrong with her car? And what the hell was that warning she felt? It would have been a severe situation if her car broke down out there, especially before cell phones, but she pressed on. Just as her resolve wavered, she started questioning if she truly did feel what she felt. She started slowing back down when the dark vehicle picked up speed. It entered into the oncoming traffic lane and came level to my aunt's car. The driver smiled, pointed, motioned and mouthed the words, "Pull over," to my aunt. She said the second she looked into his eyes, she felt pure evil. She felt a horribly sick feeling in the pit of her stomach and again heard the words in her head, "Don't pull over." She described him as looking scary, greasy and noticed he was missing a couple teeth in his smile that she'll never forget. That sent chills through her. This quickly dispelled any thoughts she had of pulling over and she put the pedal to the metal to try to lose him. He chased after her. She slowed down, he slowed down. She sped up, he sped up. It got to the point that he began to try to push her car off the road. Aunt Kay was to the point of tears as this creep continued to terrorize her alone, out in the middle of nowhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Aunt Kay sees a couple of semis off in the distance. She felt if only she could get close or even get in between those trucks she would be safe, so she took off. He continued to flash his lights, honk his horn, and try to hit her car until she got close enough to the trucks. As she got in between them, she saw the dark vehicle slow way down, and eventually disappear from view. She stayed with the trucks for a couple hours until she felt safe enough to pull over at a gas station and cry. Fast forward several years. My aunt and uncle are married. He's working at a law firm as a high-profile criminal prosecutor in Las Vegas. She's now a full-time mom of several young children. Since I've known my aunt, she's been obsessed with true crime. Dateline, 2020, and unsolved mysteries were always playing at their house. This day was no different. She was folding laundry in the kitchen while listening to the TV in the other room. The interviewer was talking about a man who was being interviewed on death row. As she paired another match of socks, she heard the man describe one of his tactics for procuring victims. According to him, he would wait along the side of the highway. A car would go by with a family, and he'd wait. Another car with a male driver would go by and he'd wait. But every so often a car would go by with a pretty woman driving alone. So I'd pull out behind and follow him. I'd flash my brights, honk and motion for him to pull over. Aunt Kay, paralyzed, continued to listen. When they would eventually pull over, I'd tell him to pop the hood and I'd be able to tell him what was wrong with their car. They would, and I'd yank a couple wires. When the car wouldn't start, I'd tell him no problems. My buddy has a shop in the next town. I can give you a ride and he'll give you a fair deal. My aunt slowly moved to the living room. They'd get in, and I'd rape and kill them. Bury him anywhere in the desert. When asked how many times he did this, he responded, "They'll never find all the bodies. I can't even count. And how many got away? 2 or 3. My aunt stood alone staring into the same toothless grin she saw on that highway that day. It was Henry Lee Lucas. Thanks, Charlie'll drive. My aunt narrowly avoided being killed by a famous serial killer. My friends and I have a podcast where we tell scary stories. This is one that is infamous in my family and that I grew up hearing and telling. My brother died when he was 21. I found him laying on the floor. It wasn't a great experience. But he does still visit me from time to time. I've seen him plenty of times at home, my previous home or mom and dad's. I can smell his favorite deodorant in places where you wouldn't normally smell anything like it, like in the shed, or catch a whiff of it in the bush where there's no one around. Not even remotely creepy to me. I just say hello or thank you. Here's one that happened to me a few months back. It was a nice Monday evening, and I was finishing up vacuuming my house, where I live alone. I carried the vacuum through the hall to the spare bedroom where I put it away, grabbed a duster and started dusting. Now, in the closet, there is a hatch in the ceiling that leads to, I presume, some sort of insulation space or pipe access or something. I've always kind of wondered, mostly as a thought experiment, whether somebody's been hiding up there, only coming out at night. It would explain some weird things that happen in my house, like things getting moved around and such. Nothing that couldn't be explained by my own absent-mindedness, but still. This particular day, I decided to shout up at that hatch, see if anybody was really up there. Again, not because I thought somebody actually was, but as more of a joke, to see what happens. Things like, "I know you're up there. Come out," and "Don't make me come up there and get you." Finally, I finished with, "I'm going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I stopped there, decided this wasn't worth it, and went back to dusting. Then I stepped back into the hallway. The hallway I had just come in from, not 60 seconds before, and there was a playing card. A playing card lying face down on the floor, and it definitely had not been there a moment ago. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a 4. I am still baffled as to how it got there. There's no furniture in that hallway that it could have fallen from. And there's no way I could have missed it. It was bright red and the floor was more of a grayish blue. It stood out. I even recognized the deck it was from. It was a deck of cards I hadn't touched in months, maybe years, which was sealed inside a magnetic case and also underneath another box, inside that very closet where I had been shouting at the ceiling. I'm baffled. I've gone over everything that might possibly have passed over that spot in the time between when I walked down that hallway and when I saw the card. None of it makes any real sense. I honestly, genuinely cannot think of an explanation. It freaked me out badly enough that I searched the whole house with a weapon and I started locking my bedroom door at night for about a week. I really don't have a clue. TL. DRI shouted the numbers 1 through 4 at the imaginary man in my ceiling. A 4 of hearts magically appears in my hallway a few seconds later. I'm going to repost my comment from a similar AskReddit being lazy today. Anyway, here you go. The way you describe her makes me think of my great-grandmother. She died when I was 12. Everyone in the village knew her as Mother. Due to a divorce, I lived with her for some years. She was awesome. She existed on strong cigarettes, whiskey and cheese on toast. She was about my height of 5 feet 2 and so thin. Born in 1899, she had cancer and a hysterectomy in the 1930s. Not only did she survive, but she kept on kicking ass. In her 70s she broke a leg having got on the roof to fix a tile. Old Welsh Nans are a very different breed, perhaps they regress to Celtic tribal behavior law. After she died, when I was 18 I saw her. I was going through a terrible time. I rushed into my nan's house, mother's old house, to grab a key, turned around and there she was. She was wearing her favorite slippers, tartan skirt and one of her aprons. This one was blue with tiny daisies on it. She was as real as anyone else but disappeared after a few seconds. Of course, I freaked and ran out, not telling anyone for years for fear they'd think I'd lost it. Ever since I've been told by people claiming to be mediums that she looks out for me and tries to protect me. I live in her house now with my family. It's nice knowing she may be around. I miss you, Mother. I can only wish to be half the woman you were. Many years ago my husband and I were living on the upper floor of an old house in Minneapolis that had been converted into a duplex. I have always had trouble sleeping and was sitting up late reading after he went to bed, and I heard someone walking up the back stairway. You could access the lower duplex, our duplex, and the attic and basement from the back stairway. The footsteps went past our door and continued to the attic, and I could hear someone messing with the doorknob. Then the footsteps went back down the stairway, then came back up. I woke my husband up and he could hear them too. He wanted to go look, but I insisted on calling the police. In the meantime we heard the footsteps walking across the attic, then they stopped. The police checked it out, found nothing, looked all around the backyard and found no evidence of anyone walking around. The back door and the attic door were both locked, and it had recently snowed out and there were no footprints in the snow, no wet shoe prints on the stairs. It's the only thing that ever happened while we were there. I'm having some things happen to me recently. This is the second time this has happened to me, so I started to document it with as much detail as I can. Greater than asterisk asterisk the 25th of August 2020 to 10:40 a.m. asterisk asterisk greater than sitting in office. Out of my north-facing window I saw what appeared to be the head of a young boy, age 4 to 5-ish, with blonde, ginger hair run past on the lawn, from the house towards the back fence. I looked at it immediately and followed it with my eyes. Within 1 to 2 seconds I opened the window and looked out to find nothing there. Went outside immediately to investigate further and found no explanation. One of our cats was inside, and the other was to my left, sleeping, as I looked out the window. We do have a son, but he was at daycare as of 9 a.m., and he doesn't reach the height to be able to see. My wife has also seen a small boy in our house, peeking out from behind the door, and she recorded a video of something knocking on the other side of the door when no one but herself was home. Here's where it gets really weird for me. My wife is a believer, and had a medium to come over. Apparently we have a 5-year-old named James who loves to run down the lawn towards the apple trees down the back. We don't have apple trees, but our section has been subdivided and there used to be an orchard down there. In high school we'd pass time driving on backcountry roads late at night. No booze or drugs or anything involved. Just chit-chatting and singing along to music or whatever while we drove around. Once when it was just one of my girlfriends and me, we were cruising when we suddenly came up on a girl in the middle of the road. We both saw her and screamed. She was so close to us, she couldn't possibly have had enough time to run out of the way. My friend swerved and slammed on the brakes so hard we wound up horizontal in the street, but when we got out to investigate no one was there. Total silence, nothing on or off the road in any direction. We were so spooked we called a friend to tail us all the way home. Over 15 years later it still scares me so much I get teary-eyed just thinking about it. My bed used to shake at night. It wasn't an earthquake, or a train passing by. I didn't live that close to the tracks. It was like someone was standing at the foot of my bed and shaking the frame. I got used to it because my parents wouldn't believe me. Also, things would happen I couldn't explain. I had some Simpsons figurines set up neatly on the shelf. I heard them hit the floor, but was too half asleep to care. When I woke up, I saw that they didn't just fall over, they were scattered across the floor like someone violently knocked them off the shelf. This other time, I was watching a movie on one of those old TV, VCR combos. I turned it off to go smoke. So, when you power it off, it ejects the tape. When I came back the movie was playing again. Someone would have had to physically push the tape back in for that to happen. It couldn't have happened on its own. Not creepy, but when I was maybe 7 to 8 dunno, I was a bit scared, and asked to sleep in my mom's bed with her. When I just got snuggled up, I quickly looked up and saw an elderly woman, lighter shadow than the rest of the room, sitting on the corner of the bed, my side. She was looking at us, silently gazing, just observing. I, being scared, got up quickly, and waved my hand through the spot, quickly got under the covers, and my imagination started running, so I hid and slept. Sometime later, a few days maybe, I asked my mom if she believed in ghosts, and she said she was on the fence about it. I prodded and she said that she had 2 experiences with a woman in the house. I then told her what I saw. A few years later, and I pondered whether she was just telling me what I wanted to hear. I asked her about it again, careful not to mention the ghost till after she told me about her experience. My mom doesn't have great memory, so didn't remember me asking. I have also asked her a 3rd time, and I am convinced there are ghosts. I want to go back and help that woman. Also, we always had these bells that supposedly kept out evil spirits. We saw it as just an ornament though.